I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Johnson?
We bow our heads, please. Our dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today. We come because we need your guidance. We want you to be with each and every one of us, everyone that's here today, and give us the wisdom we need to fulfill the duties as trustees, and with everyone here who's to follow up and be able to do what we need to do for this college. This college is probably one of the most important things in our county, and we need to keep it running in the right direction. We're very honored today to have what we hope to be our future president in our audience. We thank you for his presence. We ask now that you will guide us and direct us in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Good morning and welcome. Very much appreciate all of you being with us this morning. As Dick just mentioned in his invocation, we have the privilege of having our new president with us this morning, Dr. Bill Law, fresh from finishing the Boston Marathon on Monday. Amazing, amazing. And I want to welcome you on behalf of the board and our college family. We are thrilled that you're here and wanted to give you an opportunity to say a few things this morning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, first of all, it's a pleasure, a true pleasure to be here this morning, and I congratulate you on the work you have accomplished in concluding the presidential search. I will tell you that both Pat and I are excited about the opportunity to return here and to begin our work. The marathon is really how we get things done. You set the goal a long way out. You work every day to attain that goal. Some days the work is easier and some days the work is harder, but then in the end you celebrate the achievement of those goals. So it kind of runs the way I run my life as well. It's nice to get to the end and somebody still loves you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I am delighted to be with you. We'll be here today trying to take care of some administrative matters and hope to be with you in the next couple of months. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Furlong, I believe we have some retirement resolutions.
We do. Vicki Stedham and Stan, are you here? Who's here with Vicki? Clearwater. Did she not come?
No, she's not.
Okay. We'll take care of that one privately. And we have
Good morning, young man.
this young lady, I understand, I'm allowed to call her Vera instead of the last name that's on here. It says Lawa Wisniewska. Is that close? Boy, that's good.
Didn't miss anything.
I'm surprised you did that.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
No.
Come on up, Vera.
Bill Law's here today, and we just
Our colleagues.
after the invocation, made a brief comment.
I will. Okay, great.
He just finished the Boston Marathon on Monday.
One of the great things about working in facility services is our ethnic diversity. When it came time for Vera, whose real name is Slava Wisniewski, you can guess what part of the world she's from, came time for her retirement. It came to my mind just how diverse we are ethnically and culturally in facility services. I sat down with a piece of paper the other night, wrote down the 15 different countries that came to mind just off the bat. Caribbean countries, South America, Central America, Eastern European, Asia, Far East, all over the place. So the time and place when that really comes in handy was at our facilities picnic on Saturday when we had just a smorgasbord of ethnic food, so it was a great experience. But Vera's been with us for over 14 years now, and she's finally calling it quits. Her husband, Janislav, is here with us as well. And we just want to thank you for your good work, your hard work, and the contributions that you've made, Vera, to just a great facilities team, and we appreciate it deeply.
Would you like to say anything?
No.
Are you sure? You seem a little unsure. Sure. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the retirement resolutions.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Dr. Furlong, any new employees other than the one that we just introduced a little while ago?
It's the only one, I think.
Okay, all right.
I think we're in good shape on that one.
Okay, very good. Would someone like to make a motion on the large grouping of minutes that we have to approve?
I so move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Mr. Lang?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Any report that I might have on the presidential selection be a little bit anticlimactic, having had everybody here meet the new president.
Right.
I look forward this afternoon to one of the administrative matters that Dr. Law made reference to. Will be our initial meeting with him to discuss contractual terms and the future.
Very good.
And we all look forward to it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lang.
Question for Mr. Lang. Mr. Lang, are we complete with our prior president's contract?
Yes, sir. The payment has not been made, but all of the releases have been signed, and the contractual matters of termination are all complete.
So there's nothing else that has to come back to this board then? That's
There's
all
nothing
complete.
else that should come back to the board.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Gibbons?
I don't have a question for you, Mr. Lang. It's really for the chair. Since Mr. Lang will be doing preliminary negotiations today, is there anything, action that the board needs to take to make sure that we're clear on where we're headed in terms of the contract and negotiations?
What our plan is, Mr. Gibbons, is that we are meeting today at 1:30, and we are going to talk about some of the contractual issues, and then we will be coming back to the board for this discussion and approval of any contract that we might come to an agreement on.
I guess that's okay, but I wonder if we get ourselves in trouble instead of giving clear direction based upon what Mr. Lang spent time with legal counsel, the other counsel, Tracy Janich. And would it make more sense for us to get the information so that we're on the same page as a board and not trying to...
Mr. Lang, would you like to address that?
Well, I'd be happy to. Ms. Janich has prepared if you would, a generic contract that we will be working from. It obviously has a number of blanks in it. I think that the dialogue that will be established with President Law is going to establish and probably with some simplicity solve many of the blanks that now exist.
Sure.
I think that it's premature to even set ranges on some of matters such as base salary or vacation time. But I think after we have completed this initial discussion, we will have a feel for what Dr. Law is looking for and what we feel is appropriate, and it will all come back to the board for ratification before it becomes final.
Mr. Burke?
I agree with Devron, and I think the important thing, and I think we're all on the same page here, is that we've had a lot of discussion about the prior contracts and our frustration there, and what we desired in a new contract is simple, straightforward, very easily definable by anyone who could look at it and put dollar amounts, and that it be as close to what we the benefits we offer our senior administration as is possible, so that there's no uniqueness in this contract, that it's a very that it looks like the same that we would have for a provost or executive vice president, that type of thing. And I think if we use that as guiding principles, which we've all talked about, this is not Ken Burke's guiding, this is what we as a board have talked about, I think we're going to be well served.
Mr. Burke, I'd like to interject that Mr. McKenzie has drafted a memorandum that has been circulated to the entire group that will constitute the negotiation committee with Dr. Law, and all of those principles have been reestablished in the memorandum that's been circulated.
And they reflect the board's principles, not mine.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Well, I think, Ken, you're right on, but I do believe we'll have to place this in the hands of our board attorney, because we don't know for sure that Dr. Law may have some particular things that he wants to see in that contract, and it will come back to us. But I think the board attorney, who's, I guess, Joe, you are the chief representative for us.
Mr. Brett will be there.
Okay.
I defer always to the chairman of the
Okay.
board.
Well, the two of you certainly know the parameters that we are trying to keep ourselves from, that we've got into before. And I believe I feel very comfortable, Ken, in having those two sit down, because it will come back to us anyways.
And just as a reassurance to echo what Mr. Lang had said, at one of our previous board meetings when we talked about this, we came up with a summary of the requests of the board relative to the contract, with it relative to it being simple to read, a fairly straightforward document, and I can assure you I've seen a draft. Mr. Lang and Ms. Janish have been working on that, and I'm confident it's going to meet all of your wishes. Mr. Gibbons?
Mr. Chair, I have all the confidence in the world in you and Mr. Lang. That's not my issue. My issue is I just want the board to give clear direction to you and Mr. Lang. And if we're getting the document afterwards, and I'm sorry, Dr. Law, we have to discuss this in front of you, but I just don't, the baseline data for the last contract, it's in the, a sports agent looks at the baseline data of any defensive end in the NFL. And that's how they come up with what that person is being paid. This person is going to look at the baseline data. His counsel is going to look at the baseline data of what was paid to the previous president and what other presidents are getting across the state. I still, to this moment, have not gotten that, nor do I have a copy of the, and this is not to knock anybody or to get anybody in trouble and say, I should have gotten this. No. What I'm saying is I want the board to give clear direction to make sure that we are all comfortable and that we do not get ourselves back in another situation that we're not comfortable with. And so this is not to say that I have any problems with you, Mr. Lang, or Mr. McKenzie. I believe all three of you will do a wonderful job. I just want the board to be given clear direction to the people that will be negotiating it. And how we do that, I mean, we can do that after this or whatever, but I just want to make sure that the board is clear on what the actions that they're going to take from this point forward on the contract.
Well, Devin, I think Ken laid out some pretty close specifics of what, and then our chairman has spoken about our previous discussions. So I think the board has given Mr. Lang its views on what we want. And I think it's just time to let them go ahead and go to work.
I agree, Mr. Johnson, to a certain extent, but in contract negotiations, which I do every day, having a discussion about it and having it in writing for me to see and make a decision is two different things. And I think Mr. Lang would even tell you that he's had plenty of negotiations, I'm sure, where he start out talking about something, but when he gets it in writing, it looks completely different. So I just want to be sure of the actions that we take moving forward, that's all. And if there's a way to do that so that everybody's comfortable, then let's do that. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I do want to not put us in the same situation that we were in before. That's all. I mean, we can talk, I can give clear direction, and Mr. Lang, or Sid, or even Terry can, their interpretation of what I said may be different. They may have a different feeling about how to get there. So I just want to be clear about letting the board have an opportunity to be very clear and specific about where we move in terms of the contract. And this, I understand this conversation today is very general, so afterwards, maybe you guys disseminate the information and we would be able to give our feedback to Mr. Lang or whoever. That worked before, so maybe that is maybe the routine that we would go through this time.
Okay.
For all of you, one of our goals is to very promptly reach some recommendations to the board that we feel would be acceptable to Dr. Law, so that you will have not days, not hours, but weeks to go over both the contract and the terms and give us feedback as to where you're at.
Okay. We okay? All righty. Anything else, Mr. Lang?
No, sir, thank you.
Relative to the presidential search, for those of you who were at the meeting on the 13th when we made our selection, before we started to discuss the candidates, I had a long list of people that I needed to thank. And many of you were very patient because it was a long list, and there were a whole lot of people that were involved in making all of the logistical planning and lots of details for the search. Went on for several months, as you know. And as I thought might be the case, I left some folks out. So I apologize for that. I have contacted these three individuals personally, but I want to say publicly to Doug Duncan, Ann Cooper, and Kay Berniston, this whole beautiful search couldn't have happened without the three of you, and somehow or another I left you off the list, and I apologize for that, and I want to recognize and thank you for your help in that long process. So thank you very much. Okay, Mr. McKenzie, anything from you?
No.
Moving through the agenda, entertain a motion to move through some of these items, please.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and move, but I have some discussion.
Okay.
I'll move approval of items A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Second.
Okay.
We have a first and a second discussion. Mr. Burke.
And first of all, I'm going to apologize because a few of us were at an AACC conference and we got home very late last night, and I got my board packet, start reviewing it at 12:30 last night. And usually I have the opportunity to call Dr. Furlong, and Dr. Furlong, I apologize that this time I certainly didn't get a chance to talk with you about these questions. First of all, I want to give a thank you because on the quarterly information report, it was very helpful to have the parts that were grant funded in bold and underlined, and that made it very clear. And it's just helpful in going through these to see, which ones have the grant restrictions and our expenditures under that nature, and I certainly appreciate it. It was a helpful reader device to go through this very quickly. But my questions are really on item B1 and the quarterly information report. And first of all, we have an agreement with Follett's on the textbook rental. Is this going to be addressed in your presentation today?
I can talk about it if you like.
At that time, do you want to talk about then? Incorporate it into that? That's fine. The item number 23, the George Washington University. I'm just curious how we were able to come up with this agreement. It seems like a real good agreement for our kids, our students, when they are traveling abroad, that they're staying in dorms. And is this how do we get into this agreement?
Karen here?
Sure. Come up to the mic, though.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This agreement is for the American Dream, and it is regarding the Washington travel, Washington, D.C. And this is,
So they're actually staying in D.C.?
yes, this is a dormitory.
Okay.
And they require us to sign so that our kids can go and
Okay.
travel. Okay?
I'm sorry, I thought it was part of you thought it was study abroad. Space abroad that we were using. No,
It's in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
One of the things we did, Mr. Burke, is put the
if we send a group of students now to New York or Washington or to some of the other locations in the U.S., we're also doing that out of Violetta's office.
Okay.
Because they got the logistics for that going for the
Okay.
foreign, so this is one of those. Yeah.
And item 50, our agreement with, and I noticed this is also part of D1, this is part of two reports, the art and the rental of space. This is something maybe we could just put on a future agenda, Dr. Furlong, is do we have any more plans as to what's going to happen with this art?
I'd like to have a full workshop on all the arts at one time. Each of them has a different set of story. It wouldn't be a long thing, but I think go through FIM, go through American Stage, go through Gulf Coast.
Good.
And there's both a facility side and an academic side and a money side to them. So I think
Because
that
when
would
you
be
see
excellent.
something like this, you kind of say, well, what the heck's happening with,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
status on these types of things?
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Okay, and then 63, this is another, just where did this come from? Our articulation agreement with St. Louis Public Schools. Is this St. Louis, Missouri that we're talking about here?
Program. Pre-vet.
The vet program, 63.
Yeah, I can, Ann, do you want to do that, or you want me to wing it?
I believe this is a articulation agreement since our veterinary program is online, so that there are students, I'm afraid I don't know the actual location of the St. Louis Public Schools, but I believe it's St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay, that's Missouri.
And so that those students then can articulate some of those credits into our program and continue on.
Okay, great. That's just phenomenal. You know, when you're seeing these things, the national...
Right, the beauty of distance education.
And then number 80, and Mr. McKenzie, this is what I asked you prior to the meeting with the Bunbury litigation, and we're now up to, it looks like $30,000 of legal fees on this matter, and just wondered how much more the meter's going to go until the end of this matter.
This, as you'll recall, and I've reported the board on it before in my updates on litigation, this is litigation involving the O&P project. Bunbury was responsible for the construction. The amount in dispute is potentially in excess of $400,000. They sought in the District Court of Appeal an appeal of our denial of their request for a hearing before a hearing officer of the Administrative Procedures hearing officer. We were successful in the court in denying their appeal, which is what the fees to date have been. They have sought a rehearing before the District Court of Appeal. That's why we added from the $15,000 originally to the up to $30,000 in fees, depending on where it goes. Where it can go, for me to tell you how much the fees will be, I can't really tell you. If the court denies the request for rehearing, that'll close that phase of it, and those particular fees, however, then it potentially, as we had sought, will go to mediation first, and then potentially to arbitration, or maybe settled.
Is that binding arbitration?
Or if it, what's that?
Is that binding arbitration?
That's binding arbitration that's written into the contract. Or the alternative is if the court does grant the rehearing and does re-examine what they've said, and I don't know that that's likely, it then could go to a hearing officer, a DOA hearing officer, Division of Administrative Hearings officer, for a decision there, but they can't award money there, so then it would go back probably to mediation and arbitration. So I don't anticipate that course of action. They would just find facts, recommended facts to the Board of Trustees. Built into the contract, expenses is an amount, and Susan Ryder can probably better give you that, an anticipated amount in all these contracts, in all of these proposals and expenses for attorney's fees. So it's in a budget someplace, not always used happily because we don't have this kind of a dispute, but the problems are that Bunbury has had problems with their own organization, and they've led to this litigation where issues of whether they've completed the project and and what we really owe them are issues that we're facing of a substantial amount of money.
Mr. McKenzie, when you say they can't award money DOE, isn't it the case, though, where we've withheld payment because of not satisfaction? We haven't paid and asking for
No,
money
we have,
back.
there's over $300,000 that they are seeking that we have
Right.
not paid.
So that's their problem that DOE couldn't award things, not ours, right?
That's their problem, yeah, right. No, that's absolutely right.
Good.
DOE could find facts, though, that could be adverse to either side, but they can't award the money.
Okay. And I would just appreciate being, as the whole board would be, kept informed of this litigation. You've done that. Thank you.
And I have put that in my reports. We just got the rehearing request within the last 4 or 5 days, so
Great.
I haven't had a chance to brief the board on that part of it.
Any other questions on 91? And this is on the Bay Care Health System. And I know, Dr. Furlong, you addressed this somewhat when we did that lease last month, I think it was.
Yes.
But just so I understand this, when this first got brought to the board, we thought, well, boy, this is just tremendous what our agreement was with them. And has the agreement basically broken down to really it's just a tenant experience now where we're not involved with their corporate training part of it that we thought we would be involved with?
We do a few activities with them, but basically that's the case. It's a good back and forth public relations because we use their space all over the county for our clinical students, and they're using this space. But it's really more like the other 1 or 2 things we have in that building of a rental agreement at this point. And recently, last month, you changed the contract to, we took some of the space back and put in 3 offices. And we'll continue to talk whether we keep down the road when this contract runs out, whether we really do this again or not is under discussion.
I guess my question is this disappointing that we were not able to be more integrated with their training, or is this a natural evolution? It was just brought to us as something, boy, this is a...
Is Jim here? Oh, Stan is here. I didn't realize you're here. Stan helped get this together. I think we are a little bit disappointed, but why don't you...
Well, the original idea was that we would work closely with Baycare and hopefully begin to do some of the substantial amount of training that they conduct on their own. The challenges that we got into were with registration. Many of the Baycare staff were reluctant to provide Social Security numbers, date of birth, that kind of thing, which is what's required if you register and come through our system. And in the end, they came back and said, given the amount of resistance that we've had to that, we would prefer to just do a lease. Now, recently, they've also talked to us about sharing our learning management system, and we're under negotiations with them this week. And again, I think that'll be another way for us to perhaps begin to do some of that training in an online venue. But it's something we would like to do more of, yes.
I find that odd that there's that reluctance when obviously we would keep the information confidential, but since there is that our rule, or is that a state rule that we have to acquire that information? And on corporate training, can we waive that rule if it's a board rule and at least look at it if that's I'm surprised that's,
I can't speak to whether or not there's it's a statutory issue, but as a practical matter, we really can't keep people straight in PeopleSoft without, surprisingly, there will be multiple John Smiths and multiple Mary Smiths in the system, and if we don't have something to distinguish them, either a date of birth or a Social Security number, it causes us problems in our enterprise
system. But these are non-credit courses, right?
Yes, either way. But our non-credit courses are eligible for FTE, and we are funded for those. They're a different basis than our credit side, but we do get funding for those.
So does the state require this, maybe, information? Anyway, I would appreciate maybe looking if that's one of the reasons this broke down. That seems maybe something we have to
if nothing else, the state is going to audit the records, and if you don't have it in the system in some way, that's not...
It seems like people have gone overboard with this. When I was at USF, our Social Security number was our student number, and they published it everywhere. They listed our grades by that and published it outside the classroom.
Right, and the law has made it clear that they can't do that anymore.
I know that. Okay. I'm clerk of the court. We have to redact all the official records and put black marks over everyone's Social Security numbers. So, but it seems that obviously the college is going to has good integrity in keeping this information confidential. Anyway, thank you. The only other questions I had were on B2 and B3, and those were on these replacement of aging network equipment. And because of the age of this board, we're very sensitive replacing aging stuff. But these amounts here, usually when you get competitive bids, it kind of looks out of place. You expect a cluster, you know. And here we have a bid in this case of $245,000, $393,000, and $407,000. And then we have another bid of $348,000. And then the company which was lowest on the one bid is by far the highest on the next bid of $518,000 and $417,000. It just makes no sense. So I guess Doug or we can call up someone else. Yeah, that's Dave's problem.
The best way to best way to explain it is that outside of our control, those particular resellers work with multiple manufacturers, and they get deals amongst each others that I have no control over. I hand over a list of materials that we need, hand it to a reseller, and they come back with their responses. And the fact that they're so different represents those relationships that those different vendors have with manufacturers.
Was this surprising to you when you?
No.
No, it wasn't?
It wasn't. It wasn't that some are a lot different. For example, the discounts that, for example, Cisco might give to reseller X are going to be different than they give to reseller Y.
But Dave, why is, like with CTI, they're by far the lowest, by 140,000 on the one, and then on the next one, they're 100,000 higher than the next one. So why would CTI get the deal with the one bid and not get that same, what you talked about on its other bid?
The arrangement that on the equipment that we need for the north bid and the equipment we need on the south bid are different manufacturers.
Okay.
So in CTI's case, for the north bid, Cisco offered them higher levels of discounts than they did the other people. That's why they're low. But on the other side, there wasn't Cisco equipment involved, so they didn't have that level of discount that they would. So,
okay. I appreciate the explanation.
Question before you leave, Dave. Why is there a distinction between north and south?
We divided it up, so we didn't want to put everything into one piece because it was going to make it very, very complicated. And we thought they would actually come in at different times, but as it turned out, they ended up coming to you at the same time.
There was no way to get a cheaper price by combining?
In this case, no. It was already pretty complicated trying to get the three different types of manufactured equipment together in one. I don't think it would be any less than, in fact, it probably would end up being more. But
actually, yeah, because the way you did it,
right.
It looks like it's saving us a lot
Correct.
of money here.
Correct. If I would have brought it all in one, it would have ended up, I guess the discounts going through one reseller, they wouldn't have the same. So we kind of cherry-picked it to get a better price.
Why do we have different equipment, north and versus south? I mean...
We have several different manufacturers of network infrastructure equipment, and that is by design. We do that because we don't pledge ourselves to one manufacturer purposely. We make it open to other people. We limit it right now to really three because we don't want to go crazy, but putting those people and making them compete is important. There's a lot of companies and institutions that say, for example, we're only going to buy from one manufacturer, let's say Cisco. Well, the level of discount that you're going to get is going to be a lot less than if they have to compete. For example, typically if they're not competing, you'll get maybe a 20 to 30% discount. In this case, you could see off of our list prices, we're getting probably 50 to 55% off. And that's because they know they're competing with another manufacturer.
Well, it seems to me that our own personnel, we can't transfer from north to south to work on the equipment. It's different equipment.
It's different, but all the staff knows both types of equipment.
Okay, so that's not a problem.
It's not an issue, yeah.
Okay.
And from a operability standpoint, all the concepts are the same, and the actual operation of the equipment is fairly similar.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other discussion? Mr. Gibbons?
Just a comment, Mr. Brett. I'm glad to see that we are working with USF on the Banner Resources Grant. We're talking about water. When I was at DCA, one of the biggest things that Governor Bush used to say is our next natural disaster is going to be because we haven't controlled growth, and that water will be our next natural disaster. So I'm glad to see we're involved in that effort.
Any other discussion on the motion?
I think I had one here on D1, and this goes back, I think, to what Ken asked about, it was D1, item 2, the lease agreement with the Museum of Art Collections. And if you want, Dr. Furlong, we can put the answer to that when you bring back all of the discussions on museums.
Is this the month-to-month one, Susan?
Yes, it is.
We can do that, but basically, as Florida Gulf Coast phases out, we gave them a year where they were still storing things.
Right.
And this is shifting it down to month-to-month, because we don't think it's going to be another full year before we're out of the
Okay,
contract.
so I just wonder why we were continuing if we had a year's contract.
Yeah, it's a matter of Susan's staff having, go ahead.
2 months. We maximum 2 months. We should
Maximum
be
2
out of
months.
there, I would think, by August sometime.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just a matter of getting everything cleaned out.
Correct.
We couldn't do it in a year's time, so.
Correct. And we have to provide a space to put it, and it's a little bit more complicated than some normal space.
Right. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing
How
none,
far did we go?
up through F.
F.
E4, I think Doug answered this earlier. I had a question here, how are we going to pay off? And I think, Doug, you commented in this conversation this morning that on this loan program, the bond program.
It's Susan.
Yeah.
Dick, which item are you talking about?
He said
As soon as I find it, I'll tell you, Ken.
Which one?
I didn't stay up till 12:30 last night, so I'm still trying to figure things out. F5,
D5.
I can't find it now.
D5.
No, D5.
Yeah.
The bond issue.
This is Susan.
How do we propose paying off these bonds?
We receive a small amount of capital outlay and debt service money every year. They estimate approximately $150,000 a year, more or less, and you get it when they send it to you. And it comes off of the money that is received from the prisoners making license tags. And so historically, we've gotten it for years and years, as have all the community colleges. So what we're doing is we're bonding a portion of that, similar to the bond that you looked at last time, which was student capital improvement fee. So we'll bond a portion of that. We'll pay this bond back with those monies that we get every year. And then this will help us as we move forward with our project in Clearwater and our project in Seminole to have a little bit of extra money. Not a lot of money, but it's a pretty good amount that will help us with ADA roofs and some of those types of things.
Yeah, I had no question about the bond, I just didn't pick up on the fact how we're going to pay it off.
Right, that's how we pay it off. We get the proceeds every year, and we pay a portion of the proceeds back towards the bond.
This is the one where we let it build up over time, and now's the time, because we're not getting the PICO, to get some of these Clearwater projects done.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Dick?
No, thank you.
Any other discussion?
No, sir.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. On to item G, public hearing. I'd like to open the public hearing for the proposed changes to the Board of Trustees Rules Manual. Are there any speakers who would like to come forward and speak to these items? Hearing none, could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We'll close the public hearing.
I move approval of item H9, please.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Dr. Furlong,
Yes.
legislative update?
Okay. As we speak, they're meeting, and it's been a busy couple days. There's going to be one more meeting on the operating budget and one more meeting on PICO, but where it looks like we are right now is on the community college program fund for the system. The individual college numbers are due out like any time this morning. But if you remember, the Senate was up about 6%, the House was down about 4% from last year. They moved towards the middle. They didn't get all the way to last year's number, but they're pretty close. So if I was going to round it off, it's basically about what we got last year, a little less on the program fund side. And then on the four-year program, they basically are funding us at the same level as last year. They are going to this new formula, which is based on our amount per FTE, and bringing the other colleges up to us. But right in the middle of passing it last night, at about 10 o'clock at night, there was a big discussion about one of the particular colleges and a special project at one of the colleges, and they bumped the whole four-year thing up to the leadership. So they're meeting on that this morning. We should have the results around noon today, but I'm anticipating our four-year will be at the same level as last year. And then both the program fund and the four-year will get the 8% tuition increase, which we were talking about this in Cabinet the other day, and that becomes a bigger issue for us than ever because tuition is now about 40% of what we get from the state. I mean, we get it from students, but there used to be 25%, it's about 40%. So if they go up 8%, it's 8% on 40% of our base. So it's a significant increase, and that's how, in our operating budget, that's how they're basically balancing both the university and us. The university are going to go up 8% and then another 15% in their goal towards a national average. So our dollars per FTE are going to be, our costs for the students per FTE, the gap is already over 30%. The gap between us and the universities is probably going to be close to 40% next year. So from a bargain point of view, it's a bargain. Pell went up significantly in the federal changes, and there's the financial aid fee goes up along with the 8% tuition. So there's a good financial aid kicker in there. On the other hand, our basic position is we'd love not to increase tuition as a community college, but it's going to be 8% is what they're going to tell us to do. And PICO, tomorrow night, it looks like, at about 5 o'clock, there'll be one last PICO meeting. The only thing we have significant outside the norm is $2.7 million for renovation and remodeling for Clearwater. It was added at the last meeting, and it has a very good chance. They asked us to present on that tomorrow night. FRS, two other items. FRS, Ken, we did a lot of what you had suggested last time with the staff, and then we did a follow-up, and we had one of our lobbyists work with on the FRS issue. FACC employed Ken Plant to work on that issue, and not necessarily because of them, but that they helped us on the information side. And where we're coming out is about 10 or 12 changes, all of which we had categorized. Looks like about the only thing that still has a chance is the 25% of 1% being paid by the staff. The word last night was that, but they're at that point right now where nobody knows exactly what's in the bill, you understand? And it looked last night like that's not in the bill because there's money in the bill to pay us for any increase in FRS right now. So it looks like none of those changes are going to happen this year, and we're actually going to get an appropriation to cover any FRS increases, which means Doug doesn't have to budget that in the budget we'll be bringing to you next month. So the CCPF, the PICO, the four-year FRS, looking pretty good. The Senate is still pushing hard on $5 million for partnership colleges like we do with UPC. And I don't know if that would be our absolute first priority. I think I'd rather have that in the program fund. But if that's going to pass, we're in good position to work on it. We have 70 partners that Catherine Kennedy works with, a number of projects that we're in the middle of exploring for additional partnerships, and this will be some incentive money as Catherine goes out to work with the ICUF schools, universities, and out-of-state schools. So it'll have a positive impact for us. But that's particularly a Senator Lynn priority, and she's the chair of the conference, and there's a good chance. It's not in the House bill, but it'll all be done by about 1 o'clock today, so they can finish on time, it looks like.
That's great.
Yep.
So it's not everybody's treated as well. There's some people hurting in this budget. We're hurting. I mean, we grew and didn't get any new money, so it's not like it didn't impact us. But that 8% tuition and the fact that we had some significant reserves that we had planned on, we had a run through of our budget at the cabinet Monday, and we're feeling very good about where we're postured. And between now and the May meeting, we'll be visiting with each one of you individually to go through the budget, and then we'll act on it in May.
Mr. Johnson.
It becomes more and more apparent to me that state funding for community colleges is we're going to have to work around getting ourselves weaned off as much as we used to get, because they're passing the burden on to the students. And I'm just trying to think out loud, and I think, Mr. Chairman, I'd love to see us have a general discussion of what avenues might this institution have, or what products could it sell that would bring additional revenue into the school. Because at the rate we're going, the state is cutting it back. We're putting more emphasis on the back of the students. And there ought to be some way that we can earn other monies, because we are an educational institution. And I think we were talking about with was it Bayfront? Can we do more training of corporations and earn more money there? Can we do more of what these for-profit colleges are doing and earning money? I would just think a general workshop to discuss the issue of what do we have in the way of resources at our institution that we could derive additional monies from, because sooner or later, at the rate we're going, we're going to have to stop taking in students, and we don't want to do that. We've had to cap our professional staff on salaries, and the site for next year, at least the forecast for next year's budget, sounds very lean from what I can gather, and I'm just looking for ways that we might be progressive in our thought process to derive additional revenues for the institution. And I would think a general discussion maybe between us and some of the senior administrative staff would be a good thing to have in a workshop, and just kick it around.
Mr. Gibbons?
I agree with you, Dick. I think that we should look at that. But I also think a person that Dr. Furlong and myself used to work for, Senator Kirkpatrick from Gainesville, would always tell me, don't ever let a legislator come in your backyard that's from another area and not show them all the things you're doing in your particular programs or region. And one of the things that I've taken the benefit of at my own company, at our own company, is that if there's anybody in leadership that's from Miami, or including Senator Lynn from Ormond Beach, when they come, we take them on a tour of the college to make sure they know what we're doing that's different from the rest of the state. I think we need to do that a little more as well. I have the benefit of knowing Senator Lynn. In fact, I ran her campaign, so that helped St. Petersburg College a little bit. But if she can see all the programs, the innovative things that are going on these campuses in a day's time, maybe Dr. Furlong or Dr. Law in the future will be able to do that. I think that helps the college. I think we've missed the boat on that a little bit, because we've had a president that has been very active in the legislature, and that was very beneficial to us. But going forward, these people are going to have to see what we're doing that's much different from the rest of the state and the rest of the community college system. And I think that will help us in turn in the legislature long term. So I agree with Dick. I think we need to look at what are profit centers for us. But I also think we need to educate these folks. The legislature turns over every 8 years. I think there's 64 seats coming up or something.
I think that's right. Yeah.
64 seats that are coming up. And those people aren't, in the House, these people move the day they get there, the next day somebody's the speaker for 8 years out or 4 years out. And we have to educate those people. We have Will Weatherford in our backyard. I mean, how many times has Will been on our campuses? I think he's been here a couple of times, maybe. But
He's one that's been around a little bit.
Yeah, so, I mean, so we need to make sure that we're educating these folks. They come to Tampa all the time for fundraisers, for their parties and other things. But I think Dick's right. We need to look at profit centers, but we also need to educate these folks on what St. Pete College does different from the rest of the state. If we're going to continue to stand out, then we're going to have to educate them on what we do.
I totally agree with what Devin has said. Just need to sit down and talk about a plan.
Yep.
That, and it may have all kind of facets, as
I
you're
agree.
saying. You're taking a
I
different
agree.
direction. But we don't seem to have anything in place to try to either stimulate more state funds or to relieve the state funds.
Well,
And
let
that's,
me respond to that, Dick. I agree with everything that's been said, and we should do the meetings. But we had our council presidents and Bill and others, our position this year was, because of our growth, we know how bad the economy is, but don't treat us as badly as some of the others are going to have to be treated. Actually, here's what we really need. And so we made a big pitch on growth, which wasn't the best actual approach for this college, because we don't grow as much as some of the others, but we went along with the system approach because to be united on it. The legislature bought it. I mean, this has been a love-in this session with the legislature in terms of community colleges driving the economic development, coming back, growth's important, let's fund growth, but there just wasn't any money. And so a lot of issues, a lot of the money that came in on the Medicaid relief that was originally going to all go to health care, a lot of it came to us. I mean, we almost feel a little guilty sometimes how we're being treated a little above the others. So I think it's been a pretty effective legislative program. But then I got a chart here somewhere, I'll show it to you at the May meeting, and it shows where we were at dollars per FTE like 7 years ago. It goes up for like 2 years, and it's like 5 years in a row like this. And so this staff has been working continually with less, and a part of it is no pay raise. So absolutely, we need to do it. I mean, I think we're positioned pretty well with Will Weatherford and Lynn. I testified to Lynn last week, and I got all these beautiful notes from her because I supported her on Bright Futures, and so we're doing well with the legislature. They just have no money, and that's going to turn around. So if we do what you're suggesting and we're positioned when it turns around, we need to be ready to, okay, it's our time. Because the same time it turns around, our enrollment will drop.
You're the only person she sends a nice note to.
She's my buddy. They line up pretty well with us, Daytona Beach, and but yeah, coincidentally the day I had to testify, there was no other presidents in Tallahassee. I don't know what happened, but I think they were hiding from her committee actually, because she can be pretty tough. But she's very supportive of community colleges this year, and I appreciate it.
Mr. Burke.
What is our current tuition fully loaded with all the fees per hour?
Do you have that off the top of your head, Doug?
Is it 60? What is it?
With fees, not lab fees, just the regular fees.
Is it like 64, 68?
No, it's like $86.
86?
Thank you.
Holy smokes, and it's going up 8% on top
That's with
of
the
that.
financial aid, capital outlay fee, and all the fees, yeah.
I mean, and I know the legislature has to do this. It is though, and I know it's going to help us, but, community colleges are the access point for people. And when you're talking about $86 and 8% added on to that per credit hour, and we're going to hear from the textbook issue, I mean, we're pricing people out of the market. And accessibility really is not accessible. And I think, we have to drum home to our policymakers at some point that, when there's better economy, that this just can't stand. I mean, this is, it's unfair to the folks in Florida who depend on us, and especially, we're still the place where first-time college people go, where minorities go to, where low-income people go to, and we as a board need to address that topic too, because it seems like we just keep adding. Ever since I've been on this board, and it's been 11 years now, I think we've had 5, 6 tuition increases by the legislature, and it's it doesn't get talked about much. It's always been, oh, well, we have to do it, you know, and I just didn't realize it's gotten this high, and I should have known that.
There is the state has a tuition task force for next year. I happen to chair it till June, and I think the trustees ought to weigh in. It's more of a presidential-driven group, and I think that's a good opportunity, too, if you have some positions to get them into that mix early.
I want to continue on, but I certainly want to hear Mr. Johnson first.
Well, in addition to this, and we're going to address it shortly, I hope, is textbooks. I ran into a friend who's a mother who supports a family, and she was telling me she can only send her son to so many classes this summer because she doesn't have enough money to pay the tuition, let alone the books. And we're trying to do our best to get some help for her. But there's got to be many people out there that have to make a choice. You talk about retirees that do their pill cutting because they can't afford to take the full prescription, so they cut the pills. In fact, the VA gives you a pill cutter when you enroll out there to cut your pills down. But you can't do that with students. And in the long run, if the students don't have enough money and have to lengthen their education out, I think it's more costly to the state. In this case, this young man, who's a very brilliant young man, can't get all his classes in because his mother can't afford it. Now, granted, maybe he could get a job or he could take out a loan. There's a lot of things I guess you could do, but it's still a problem, I believe, and the textbook problem is getting even worse as time goes on, because someone, I think it was on the radio, I heard a book, a psychology book,
$300.
costs $300.
I heard that.
Which is it's got to be just totally ridiculous.
That was part of our packet.
Yeah.
Okay, somewhere I ran across it, I forget where, but it just startled me. And the cost, the overall cost for students has got to be addressed. And granted, we're allowed to go up to 8%, and I'd sure hate to do it, but we may have to.
I don't think it's going to be an option that's going to tell us.
Well, but to pass it on to the students,
No, I mean, the tuition will be laid out in the statute.
okay, well, then we just generally don't have a choice. But we have to realize it probably is cutting out a lot of people who should be going to this institution and going elsewhere, or doing something, or not getting an education.
Not getting it.
And that's just against our mission.
Mr. Gibbons.
Thank you to both Mr. Burke and Mr. Johnston. I'm about to throw Dr. Williams under the bus because I get people coming to my house about 3 or 4 times a week talking about the same issue, and I send them to Dr. Williams, and she tries to resolve those issues as best as she can. I totally agree, but we're going to have to try to figure something out on these textbooks because there are people that are being priced out, and I think, not because I'm a minority, but I understand that a lot of times minority parents cannot afford to send 1 or 2 kids to school at the same time. And I've seen a lot of situations where parents are having to, they say, well, you go to this school, and then we'll get you in the St. Petersburg College, and that doesn't always work out. And I totally agree with you, Dick, when you said, you can try to get a loan or financial aid, but there's only so much of that to go around, and you get what you're offered. You don't have a choice about what you get all the time. So we definitely need to talk about the issue because I think Dr. Shirley on the Midtown campus is feeling the crunch because there are young people or folks that are there that are students that can't afford books, and I see them sharing books and other things. And I think that happens a lot on a lot of campuses, not just on that campus. But we need to help them be able to survive, and because when the economy, this will happen again, the economy will go south again. And what happens is people go back to school. They want to get retrained, or they want to have something when the economy comes back to say that, look, I've been doing something, and I am trained to be in the workforce when it opens back up. We need to be prepared to help those people. I don't know how we do that, but we need to talk about it, I think, going for a long term.
Mr. Burke, you had some other items?
Actually, this is what Mr. Johnston and Mr. Gibbons said leads right into one thing I read last evening coming back from the Chronicle of Higher Education had a good article on the Los Angeles system on their open textbook concept of everything that's out in the internet and basically instructors compiling a textbook for the open textbook, which is free to a student. And Los Angeles is really pushing that. I know it needs faculty buy-in and all that type of thing, but I certainly hope, if you haven't read that article, you all look at that article and see how we can better apply that. If it's just a course or two here out of the 5 courses, where you don't have to pay for a textbook, that'd be a magnificent thing. But also I want to bring a concept that Connecticut is using in financial aid, which apparently is having tremendous success. Tanja and Ann and I heard constantly, what was the constant theme? Completion of the Undersecretary of Education, Martha Cantor, spoke to us. Jane Oates from the Department of Labor spoke to us. I went to the Gates Foundation seminar with Troyer, and I forget the gentleman's name. And completion is where it's at in higher ed right now, the standard. And we probably need to talk more about this as a college and as a board, and we need to become better educated. But on the completion front is one thing that Connecticut has done. The facts prove that part-time students, and this is just, doesn't take rocket scientists to figure this out, but they've had studies which show it. If you go part-time, your chances of completion are more remote than a person going full-time. And that only makes common sense. But what Connecticut has done in financial aid, for every student who gets financial aid, and part-time students who get financial aid, the part-time student who gets financial aid is given a sheet they have to sign off on in what their financial aid package would be if they were a full-time student. And what it's doing is students are looking at that and they say, I only can go part-time. That's what they come in and say to the counselor. And we had our financial aid seminar, we didn't bring up this topic. But the Connecticut model was say, I only can go part-time. So they say, okay, well, we'll figure financial aid on 6 credit hours. Well, you get minimal. But if you take 12 to 15 credit hours, what Connecticut is showing, wow, I didn't know it was going to be that high. I didn't know I was going to get that Pell Grant. I didn't know I was going to get this. I think I can go to work part-time and go to school full-time based on this, and because of that, their completion rate has gone way up. So I certainly hope this is something, and I know we haven't met on our financial aid, and Tanja, we still have a meeting plan, but I hope that's a concept we at least look into. Maybe, you hear these things at these seminars, maybe they're not as great as they seem to be, but on the surface, it seemed like it was a concept which just seems like it makes a lot of sense. But this whole completion thing, which I think we're making inroads with the Gates Foundation and them getting a better understanding of how you just can't measure completion like Harvard University does. That we have students who are single moms, and their definition, they may come here with the concept of getting a 2-year degree, but they're taking 5 accounting courses, and as a result of those 5 accounting courses, I'll say accounting because that's a good subject we like, Dick, they're going from making a $12 an hour to an $18 an hour, and they've deemed themselves successable. And they may not have completed a degree, they may not complete a certificate, but to them, they may have said they were here for a 2-year degree, but gosh, they got that $18 an hour job, now they're happy, and they may come back at some other time and finish. A lot of the national look at that as that student has failed. Well, that student hasn't failed. And I think the point was driven home at the opening session. The last Commerce Secretary, who was chairman of the board of the Kellogg's Corporation before he got made Commerce Secretary. Chairman, CEO of Kellogg's, brings the best to you each morning. He doesn't have any college degree of any type. He has a bunch of college courses, he said. He said he took cost accounting, he he took all these accounting courses and finance courses and economics courses, but he doesn't have a college degree. Now, he wasn't advocating that, but, you know, he is a failure under the system of the completion system, and this is a man who went up through the ranks and became president and CEO of Kellogg's Corporation, became Commerce Secretary for the United States. So, I mean, a lot of people didn't like his remarks because he said that, because we're a bunch of higher education people, but as a trustee, I felt, hey, you know, I think he drove the point home that there's different definitions of success, and for our students especially, we want them to earn degrees. We want them to have completion certificates, but that is not always the practical solution. Anyway, main point is I would like us to look into the Connecticut model.
Ken, just to follow up, I remember a year or so ago, we were at an ACC conference, and the lady from the Gates Foundation was touting this completion, and both Ken and I, we couldn't get to her because she was so mobbed, but community colleges, in my mind, are not geared like a four-year institution to go after a BA degree. We have students that, just as Ken said, who are coming here for different reasons, and it's not for, it may be a certificate, it may be that they just want to learn something, taking special classes in whatever, and I think one of these days, there's some classes out here I would like to take, but I'm sure if I did, I would enroll, and I would be a failure because I only wanted to take one or two classes and I'd go away. And those statistics really don't work, I think, in a community college, and I don't believe that the educational system in itself, the higher administrators, recognize that a lot of our students are here for a particular purpose and not for a degree. And Ken, I wish we could have talked to that lady from Gates, because Gates just gave, I heard, like $120 million or something to the community college system.
Gates is down the hall right now. They're meeting with Lumina and with our
great.
DOE folks. I talked to them yesterday on this topic. So.
Well, but this is a good topic, because the lady that talked to us had no idea that the makeup of the students here are not like a university. They don't enroll with the intent of getting a four-year degree.
They're getting there, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it's still not that sense.
That's not that sense. They're here, and like I said, if I come in and enroll for a class here, I'm not after a degree. I'm after some knowledge.
Dick, she's getting it. I mean, I got to talk to her, and she put on that seminar, and it was not a big, massive seminar, but she, you could see her tone has changed some.
Okay.
Troyer, her name's Troyer.
Yeah, I thank you then for doing that.
Just all of us part of it. Anyway.
I take it that the sense of the board is that we'd like to have a workshop on
I think I got about 5.
perhaps being a little more...
That's good. They're all good points.
Looking at some entrepreneurial items or some cost-saving items for our students. And so, Dr. Furlong, if you could try to put something together on that.
We will. Next month, we're doing the budget and honors. And then June, there's no workshops planned, so we can get one or two of these on there.
Great. Anything else from you on the legislative update?
Nope, I think by Monday we'll know where we are, for sure.
Any other items?
No. We're up to the 2 workshops, yeah.
Great.
Terry, before the reports, can I add one item?
Sure. Go ahead.
Just before we have the reports, Dr. Furlong, I had a lot of questions when we approved the Consular College Corp project and sent them, and I was satisfied with the answers, and a lot of it was that the proof will be in the next few months at the time of the inception of that as to whether this is going to prove to be successful or not. I certainly would appreciate a report, maybe next board meeting.
I can do that right now, because we're not doing it anymore.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we at the last meeting we talked about.
Yeah, we voted against it.
I was on the phone at that meeting. Okay.
Let me tell you where we are, just real quick, because there's been a month. So let me tell you how we're progressing. We took it very seriously. We worked with the Consular Corps guys, and They were a very different structure from a higher ed structure, and they didn't want to lose their board of chancellors. They didn't really want to hire the executive director through the kind of processes we use for affirmative action and for other reasons. There were just a series of things without a fight that occurred that led Ann and I and others to come to the board last time and suggest that we terminate the contract. What we are going to do, and we will continue to update you on it, Ann is working with corporate training. During the process, we met with several State Department people who kind of advised us, maybe you should do this alone and get involved with training counselors, both honorary and regular, and we'll help you. So we're going to have something that'll be called something like the Consular Training Institute. It'll be part of corporate training, but housed at Allstate. And we'll be doing just the educational piece of it, and it will not have the full-time executive director, that type of thing. So we've, we learned a lot. We have some good friends, but we're in the 3-month period. Sid has given them notice, and there's a 3-month phase-out underway. We never did fill that full-time position, so we're in good shape.
Thank you, and I'm sorry to bring it up.
Okay.
I didn't realize
that.
All right, thank you. Moving through the agenda, textbooks.
Okay, Doug, you want to come up? Last time we did this, we were given the results of the meetings with the students, and a number of what I heard this morning were addressed in different pieces, the Follett Rentals, some initiatives that Ann had and all. And now that all those workshops are finished, we want to thank the board members for coming to most of those, if not all of them. Doug and Ann and Tanja put together a little response of where we go next on this. And so give them a chance to run through it and take questions.
And again, we want to thank you for your interest in helping us look at this issue. It's a very important issue, one that is a national issue. We're not alone in this fight, and looking at how we can lower the cost of textbooks to students. And as a follow-up to our board meeting, when we talked about our textbook contract and the textbook issues, we want to come back with you and share with you what has happened since then and where we are in the matter. And I also want to thank you guys again for coming to those meetings on the campus. It meant a lot to the students to see board members actually sitting there but also participating in the meeting, and I've had students share how important that was, and I think the faculty and staff appreciated it as well. So we're here to share with you our findings and to let you know where we are with that, and we'll start with Doug.
Okay. I guess you all can see this from where you are.
Yes,
okay.
you can see perfect.
Following our last meeting where we did a textbook workshop and prior to going out and actually doing the forums, I also had an opportunity to review a presentation that was done by Will Holcomb at the state level, and I noticed in going through that there were many of the things in that were fairly consistent with the kinds of things that we were experiencing, particularly the kinds of limits that we as an institution have directly over textbook costs, but more importantly the fact that rental programs and the things that we are able to do to mitigate high textbook costs, we felt like we were pretty much on track to do. So it was kind of backed up the fact that we were at least on the right track. I also noticed along that line that in the latest edition of University Business, I hope Dr. Law was still here, but Tallahassee Community College and their rental agreement with Follett is also discussed in terms of the savings and so on. So we both participated in the pilot program of Follett and are both pretty much on the same track. When we scheduled meetings on the dates that you see there on the screen, we had well over 200 students participate. It was very good discussion, a lot of good issues came up. We're going to cover what I think were the major issues that we came upon. Just a little, I'm going to hit the high points of kind of what we laid out for the students, for those of you who weren't there. We did kind of review some of our recent initiatives for the text rental program. We talked about our textbook website and expansion of common text and also some recent initiatives under the laws, the new laws, to post our ISBN numbers so the students could do more shopping. I also really tried to highlight the fact that the textbook industry is in such transition right now. Just about every week I pick up a magazine or a paper that talks about how many more publishers are moving toward e-texts, and we really feel like that is going to move along much quicker, but we talked about that at the meetings, and as we, there you go. We really highlighted the fact that there are so many electronic devices coming out on the market, and that probably there is one, I think I gave you a new one where we added a slide, where, these devices are moving along so rapidly. You see the iPad now, and probably a year from now, this page will be 10 pages like this. But the publishers are following suit, and we emphasize that we anticipate a big shift, probably much sooner than we anticipate, going to the electronic format for books. So what I want to do is we're going to run through what really came out. There were many, many questions. There were probably hundreds of questions. We tried to categorize them into some of the major categories and then talk a little bit about where we are headed with those. And with that, I'll move to, and want to take the first one.
One of the things that our students recognize is the potential of our wonderful faculty to develop their own course materials, and we are encouraging our faculty to do that, particularly in association with the Open Textbook Collaborative that's taking place in the state. One of our professors, Dr. Lisa McDonald from the Seminole campus, actually participated in a seminar and has adopted an open access sociology textbook for her course, and she has also been asked to join the collaborative and is going to be teaching an international online class entitled Discovering and Selecting Open Textbooks. So our WITS team is also continuing to encourage this process, and this is one of the ways. We do have some faculty who have developed their own course materials for labs and some other course materials for other subject areas. But obviously creating the full-fledged amount of materials that one would find in a textbook is somewhat challenging. But our faculty are moving more in that direction and looking at more ways in which they can save money and lower the cost of textbooks for our students.
Ann, could I get a question to you on that? The more we encourage that, which is great for faculty, I think, the more, though, that you have a limited edition of textbooks, and I assume because the limited number being published, there's going to be an added cost to them. Is there any way that's practical? If we produced textbooks in mass, they were bound to cost a little cheaper.
Well, primarily what we're looking at is producing it in the online Orange Grove. So then all of that is online. It's not in a published hard copy, and it's up to the student whether they want to print that material out or not. And so then you can change that without difficulty since it's all online. And so that's primarily what we've been looking at.
Right.
We have had some in-house publishing of like lab manuals or additional material for courses.
That's future. I don't know whether today or not.
It's now,
It's there today?
It's now, yeah. The Orange Grove already has some of those available, and we're looking at more faculty participating so it can increase the quality and the number of different types of course textbooks that are available through that process.
Does that allow the professional staff to select a particular textbook? You know, if we're all using the same textbook, it's going to be cheaper.
Right. Well, yeah, you have to weigh the pros and cons. For example, we've just been discussing this. If we have a course that we have selected a college-wide textbook for, and one of our professors or a handful of our professors want to consider an open access book, which would be free, we're going to allow for that.
But when we do that, we've added more costs to the students.
Well, we'll pilot that, and if it looks like that's something that's going to work college-wide, then we would move in that direction. But I think we have to allow for our faculty to be able to survey the open access textbooks as an option, and that takes some time, and so there may be an interim where we have a hard copy textbook in some of the sections versus a open access textbook in others.
There's the meat of my question. When you allow the faculty to make their own choice, they're probably between last year's edition and this year's edition is, to most students, probably insignificant. But yet there's several $100s in costs in that new textbook.
But Dick, what we're saying is, you and I go back to when that was the big issue. But what we're saying here is they're bidding a single textbook, which is what you're saying is positive, but then they're talking about the other alternative is a free textbook.
Right.
So it's not like the old days where the second textbook was $80 and this one was $50, and then we change the editions. We do the single one, we stay with it the right period of time, but then also if the Orange Grove project has something up that we can access for free, and Daryl Schrader's teaching the course and says we're going to make this one available in my class, that's even less for students. But there's faculty input in how we do that, and that's what they're negotiating course by course.
Well, the faster we do it, the better.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair, I have a question as well. In talking about the online courses, and I'm glad Dr. Furlong talked about former faculty and that kind of stuff. We were just talking about having profit centers. If you have online books, wouldn't that enhance our online courses, and maybe we could see more of an increase in terms of revenue in this area? And we could use, maybe to keep the cost down, we could use former faculty and other things if we had all of our courses online, the ability to do them online, to have them online, along with the textbook.
Right. Well, we have quite a large number of, you can do an AA degree completely online now.
Yes.
And adding the either an e-textbook, which is less expensive than a hard copy, or an open access textbook, or a link to reusable learning objects, as they're referred to, where it's all online. And that's one of the things that we've been encouraging, is that when we create what's called a course of record, which is an online course that is set up for our faculty to use, that we are encouraging that they are not textbook bound, that we look at other options. Some faculty prefer to have the textbook, some students prefer to have a textbook, but we don't want the online course to be locked into a particular textbook. Now that's challenging because there are a lot of publishers that are producing very useful online course content if you adopt their textbook. So it's a balancing act, and weighing the pros and cons and piloting different options so that we can provide. And so we're looking at all those in providing our students with a...
I'd like to see maybe a cost analysis of what it would, what could the upside be, and also the downside of having, when you have these books or these materials provided online, it opens up the possibility for someone who lives in Michigan who wants to take a course they don't. I mean, I think long term we got to start thinking that way, because we're not just going to. And I love the fact that you can get your AA online. That's great, but there are other people that may or may not be able to get a course provided in that semester that could look online, and we could be their only alternative. And
Exactly.
If it's all e-learning, then that's great.
Exactly, and that's what we're hoping to do. In fact, we're also hoping to ramp up not only beyond Florida's borders, but internationally in regards to our online.
Devron, and maybe Jim Oliver provided this to me a couple of years ago, and it's probably still correct, but I remember when they showed the online registration for our courses, there was a cluster around Gainesville and a cluster around Tallahassee of folks who are going to Florida State and the University of Florida who couldn't get their course there and were signing up for it here. They were University of Florida student, but they were signing up for their a course here as part of their. Is that still the case? Or do we still find that happening?
Especially in the summer.
Especially in the summer. And I think with our specialized program on Vet Tech, And that probably has a national
Yes.
audience to it, because
Well, and the bachelor degrees are now, 70% of the enrollments are online. I mean, that's where we're going. I mean, there's no question.
I just got a call from a president from, and actually an email from a president from Illinois, and I think I forwarded it on to you and one of our vet tech director, because he was so impressed with our program here. So, I mean, it is, so the specialized program, you're right.
I think long-term, that's where we're going to go.
That's what's happening.
I had a question while we're on this question. Do we still require the students, if they buy a used textbook, to go to the bookstore to get the computer disk, which I'm not sure I understand, to get the code to use it?
If that is used as part of the course, then yes. Those access codes are made available through the bookstore, and they would purchase that. But what we've done is we've separated those materials, so then rather it just coming bundled with a new textbook, which is more expensive, we provide it separately so that if a student can get access to a used textbook, then all they have to do is buy the access code through the bookstore. But that's only in the instance where those are required materials for the course.
Okay, but what do those access codes cost to students?
That varies depending upon the publisher and what it is that they're accessing. If they're accessing auxiliary materials versus the full course content. So they vary.
Aren't those fairly costly and almost drive the students to buy a new textbook?
Well, you're right in that sometimes the publisher may, by doing it in a bundled format, it costs less than if the student buys them separately. A lot will depend upon where the student gets the used textbook from. And so we at least offer them both options so that they can do a cost analysis and then decide what's best for them.
It seems like to me we ought to just cut that out completely, because if you have a family and one prior member of the family, the sibling, buys a textbook, they can't use that textbook until they buy that access code, which it's just another cost that's thrown at students and parents, and that access code, I don't see, once you have the textbook, you shouldn't have to go get other access code.
Well, it really depends upon what the access code is giving you access to, and sometimes it's a major portion of course content is through that access code, particularly if in some instances where it's an online course that a publisher has particular material associated with that course.
What would it cost us to just stop that immediately and give free access codes to anybody who bought these used textbooks or has a used textbook?
Well, I would have to check the actual figures, but I think that would be extremely expensive because we have more courses using access codes to course content.
Right, but I know it's an irritation to the student. They acquire a book and then they can't really use it because they can't get the access code. And that just doesn't seem right to me.
Well, we make both available.
I know, then they have to either buy a new book.
No, we make the access code available on its own.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, but that just seems like you're double charging somebody. And I know the students don't like it, and I know parents don't like it because I get a lot of complaints about that. And it just seems to me that that's like the school is double dipping somehow. They've sold a textbook sometime to a student, that student has passed it on for whatever reason to the next student then has got to go.
Really, the last 2 meetings ago, the discussion was just the opposite. Everybody was saying that we were forcing them to buy both, so we unbundled it. So they can get the used textbook, which is what the students and the parents wanted. But then if there's material that's needed for the course, particularly if it's an online course, they got to get at it. And think of the access code as a license, rather than buying a second book. Remember, we were in school, there were 3 or 4 books. I think of 10 books in some courses. Rather than going to that, we're giving them access online through a license fee. So the argument is in our contract, are we paying a fair price for the license or not? But it's really cheaper doing it this way. If we bundled it together, which is how we used to do it, That was the complaint, is that we
Right.
were charging them double. But
But
now we're not. We've broken it apart. They can go to Amazon if they want on the one, and then they approach the license fee.
But they still have to go back and buy a license fee.
Well, they're not going to give their material away. I mean, that's for sure.
Well, in a way, once you have the textbook, to me, you should have access. And we either ought to negotiate hard, or we ought to take that access code and let all the students have
But
it.
when we did it that way, the textbook and the license fee were part of the same thing. It became cheaper when we split it apart.
Right.
So it sounds more complicated, but it's better for the students.
What's better for the student?
I don't think you want to go back and pay more.
No. I just think that once you have the textbook, the access code ought to follow. If you buy a used textbook, you ought to have an access code
And then
free.
it'll cost more.
But you have to go buy and buy the access code.
It'll cost more if you bundle them, it'll cost more.
I know. I'm not saying bundle.
Well, that is what it is. If you put two together, it's
No,
bundled.
I'm not saying put the two together. What I'm saying is, if you buy a used textbook, you automatically get access code.
Paid for by,
Okay.
I mean, what you're saying is paid for, that the college should absorb the cost of the access code, because the publisher's not going to give out the material for free. Is that
Well,
what
I'm
you're
just saying that in our contract with the publisher, when a book is sold, the access code, no matter who has the book, it's passed down from generation to generation, the access code comes with it. Because it seems like to me, your publishers are really gouging us.
But we are encouraging our academic offices to negotiate with publishers as much as possible in regards to those types of issues. But as far as gaining, because they see that access code as a license to use that material for a particular period of time, just like with software. And so we are trying to negotiate as best we can.
Yeah, that's why I wondered, what would the cost be to the school if we just bought those access codes?
I think it would be very expensive because there are so many of those materials that are online now.
Mr. Burke?
Can you back up and just explain, and I'm not clear on, when I went to school, you used to be able to get textbooks, and a lot of times you had an accompanying workbook. Is basically the access code the workbook? Is that?
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's actually access to course material online. A lot of publishers have created online courses that are very rich and interactive and provide our students with probably much more than we could create because they put millions of dollars into creating that.
I guess then, is the textbook very dependent then on the textbook itself is not of value without the online component? Is that how it works now?
Correct. And one of the things that will probably help this is our certification process, where we're going to talk about that. If you'd like, I could address it now. The certification process is where we're asking our faculty to decipher and indicate what materials are required in the course, are actually going to be used in the course, and then those that are optional, and then, in other words, auxiliary, they might be helpful, but they're not required, so that students know exactly what the situation is in regards to that. That had been made, I think, a little bit unclear because Follett's had changed required, and instead of optional, they said recommended. And so many times then students weren't sure, well, if it's recommended, does that mean I should get it? I might get a better grade. And so we've asked them to go back to required versus optional, so it's very clear. And we're also asking faculty to certify if a new edition is adopted, that it is substantially different.
Mr. Gibbons?
I don't want to steal your thunder, Dr. Cooper. I guess my next question after hearing all this is, what are the most innovative contracts that are out there with book companies that exist today? Do we know that? Ones that, there have, all the colleges across the country have to have some sort of contract. Do we know of any that are better than, what we have, or the most innovative, or is there something being piloted out there that we can start to move forward with. I know we talked about the ThinkPad, iPad, the Kindles the last time.
Daytona model.
Yeah, the Daytona model. I mean, but is that the best model, or can we also look to see nationwide what other people are doing with these book products?
Absolutely. I think we should continue to look as broad-based as we can at what people are doing, and we are following the Daytona. I think the difference there is, of course, our contracts are with bookstores, with the bookstore. What Daytona, I believe I said that in the last meeting, is that they're looking at going directly to publishers and negotiating more specific, better deals on e-books and so on. And we will continue. It's a later slide in here where we talk about that, but I think we have to do that. Things are changing very rapidly, and we have to follow.
I would suggest that we look at all of the contracts throughout the country to see who's doing what, who's the most innovative, who's getting the best deal, not for the student, because that's ultimately who we need to make sure they can have the materials. Yes. And secondly, when we look at that, we should also be looking at grants. I mean, I got to believe like the Microsoft Foundation would be looking to get into, all their programs and all the, money that they give like $90 million or something to the Hillsborough County School District. So we need to be aggressively going after, I think, grants and other things to help us in that regard to see how we can get to this e-learning situation.
Agreed. And I think what the issues you raise just further reinforce that as we, Tanja will cover our task force, is that this is an ongoing. We have a group formed, and we are going to continue to look very aggressively at those things.
Mr. Johnston.
Terry, I'm concerned if we're going to have an 8% increase in tuition, and we don't do anything about the book costs immediately, it's just going to add even more burden on our students. What if we decided at an institution, because we do make money off the bookstore, that we forego for a temporary period any profit we have on the bookstore and plow that back into either bookstore scholarships or reduction of price? Because if we're going to have to address, and we don't know this yet, an 8% increase, that we do something immediately to address the cost of books. Granted, you're making the budget up, and maybe, Doug, you can find a way to take out any profit that we get out of the bookstores, and we turn that profit back over to the students in some manner in an equitable way by a reduction of cost or some creative idea. And we do that not as a permanent thing, but as a temporary thing until we can find other solutions. Because I'm just concerned if we throw an 8% cost at students and then we can't give them any help on cost of textbooks, it just adds to it.
Dr. Furlong.
Just if I could, just for a second, Doug, I mean, kind of put this back in context. They're reporting to you on what the students suggested, and then they've got a series of recommendations. That's sort of one of them. So you might want to let them go through this.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Because we're kind of, and I think if they finish what they heard, and then they have a couple ideas, one of which is some vouchers with students. And actually it was Doug who came up with it, similar to what you're saying, Dick. Maybe we can put that in.
You'll see it's part of the budget presentation that we'll show you next month, some options.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for getting
good point.
No, it's good.
No, feel free. To address your question about what are we doing now, and that of course is what was the focal point of the sessions with the students. What's happening now? And we reviewed our new swap website with them where they can go on and swap books and listings, and it's been very effective so far. The rental program is the other big one. Those, because they were sort of being piloted in the fall, we knew when we went out there, I started the sessions, I said, well, would you raise your hand if you've heard of the rental program, whatever, and probably, less than maybe a fourth of the hands went up. So we knew that we had, we've got to be more aggressive in marketing those things. But the rental program itself is probably the single biggest cost savings measure to the students. We're talking 50% or more and reduced price to get that same book of what it cost you to buy prior to the rental program. Now, again, fall, it was a pilot program, it was limited numbers, but we've now, we're finalizing the contract to add the rental program to our contract. It's being fully expanded. We anticipate, both now going into the summer and next fall, that not only will many more students come back to the bookstore because of that, who are going out to these different sites and buying them cheaper, that it will expand significantly the customer base of Follett, at the same time significantly reducing the cost of textbooks. That's the biggest one. You know, even if we eliminated a commission, you'd probably see, you know, on a $100 book, you know, maybe a drop of $5, $10 depending on what the book was. Whereas the rental program is huge. It's half or more, so it's very, very significant. One of the issues in the contract, if I maybe go to what Mr. Burke, some of you referenced that item on the board agenda, is that our contract with Follett, not only did it not reference the rental program, and there were some details that needed to be incorporated, but we also had a minimum, we had, I believe it's $1 million minimum commission amount that was payable. That was a bottom, whereas if they go to this full-scale rental program and you reduce the cost of that textbook to half or more, then they were concerned that, well, you know, we're going to get fewer commission, you're going to get lower commissions or lower total amount, and that therefore we needed to address that issue, because I think, of course, Follett was concerned that, well, you know, if our gross sales is suddenly cut in half, your commissions are cut in half, do we still owe the $1 million? So that's a primary issue in that contract, which makes sense.
Sorry.
But part of this is, in fact, Follett, I can pass out some, they gave us samples of some, yeah, if you understand those out, of some samples of you know, how we can better go about marketing these programs, and we're going to be very aggressive with that as we go forward. This, I think, Ann covered. You have some.
Right, this is the certification process. It is actually part of the Higher Education Opportunity Act that we certify that the materials are either required or optional, and that when a new edition is selected, that it is substantially different. And this is one of the areas where we've asked Follett to really put pressure upon the publishers, because what we have found in some instances is that the publisher doesn't let us know that there's a new edition coming, and the old edition is ordered, and then all of a sudden Follett has sent the new edition. There's been no opportunity to certify that it is substantially different. And so we've asked them to put pressure on the publishers that if they're going to bring out new editions, that we need the time to be able to certify whether it is substantially different or not.
Well, that would bring up a point. I mean, if you bring out a new edition, that takes away all of the old rental or the old textbooks. So we ought to certainly have some control over any new editions that are coming out.
We would like to think so, but one of the things that publishers have done is that, say they come out with a new edition and there's maybe a few pictures changed or a few page changes in page numbers only. And so we've asked for the old edition. They'll tell us that they can no longer provide the old edition. Follett's told us that in some instances they burn them.
Well, somewhere along the way, we need to get a better control of that, either through our contract or maybe we deal with through a different distributor like Follett, because having the publishers just change a small amount of the textbooks and then probably increase the price is passed right to the students, and that's part of our problem.
One of the biggest problems.
And I don't know how we would enforce that or go about it, but certainly I think this board would encourage you to either talk to Follett and say, look, something's got to give here, because we're just not going to do business with you or anybody else if they're not doing it the way we want it done.
Right, and that's what we've tried to enforce and encourage with follettes, and I think one of the other areas is through the legislature, letting them know that we're doing everything we can, but sometimes the publishers are the ones that need to cooperate.
Well, right, but how do we get there so that they know that we're not going to tolerate that any longer?
Well, we're telling them as best we can.
Okay, if we made a board resolution for you, would that help?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure would.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, the legislature said you have to do this, and then when Ann and them try to do it, they're not able, that's when they're getting this blowback. So we're working on it, we'll be working with the legislature, but, this contract's going to come up again, and you're basically telling them,
Well, can we make a resolution that says this board wants to follow what the state requirements are and really don't want control over the new publications, or at least input when they're coming out, so that we can reject them or continue to use the old textbook.
Would you like Mr. Duncan to prepare something to look at the next meeting?
Let's do that.
Like that, then you'll have it structured.
Okay.
And you can amend it,
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be great.
There's another influence that's a big part of the rental programs, is that now the bookstores are looking at that. If that rental program is really going to work, they can't turn those. They've got to put more pressure on the publishers because it won't work. You keep changing those books over, the rental program goes out the window. Right. So there's pressure from there too. But I'll be happy to do that. Okay. Yes.
In the essence of time, if you could go ahead and move through the rest of your presentation, and let's us save our questions for the very end, okay?
Great. Another major issue that came up, because such a large number of our students, of course, get financial aid, the question came up probably at every site was, is there a way that the textbook, the line of credit that a financial aid student gets in the bookstore could somehow be put on our Hire One card so that we could go to Amazon and these other places to buy them. That's something we're going to have to look at. I think there probably are some alternatives. What I pointed out in that session was that line of credit they get, we don't actually give money to the bookstore. The bookstore just creates that for us, and then when we release the financial aid, then we pay Follett for it. Again, they'll go back to the rental program. If they use their financial aid to rent the books in the bookstore, that frees up more money, frees up more of their financial aid to use for other purposes, tuition or whatever. So it's the rental program is still one of the main issues in Tom Job.
At several of the meetings, either faculty or students recommended that we had a standing task force to discuss the textbook issue. And so we agreed with them on that and put together a task force that will be led by Yvonne Ulmer. And that task force will meet at least twice a term to discuss the current status of textbooks, how it impacts students, but also faculty and having to work with publishers and changed editions and certifying books and things of that nature. And so you see the task force there. It also includes students. And so I think we have a robust group that will be able to sit down and really address the issues that students and faculty deal with regarding textbooks.
Would you consider a trustee?
Well, sir.
Absolutely.
Are you volunteering?
Mr. Johnston would.
I'll make that.
No, I would tend to agree with Ken on that. If you would keep us informed, and I know this has been a busy tax season, busy season for me, so I haven't been able to attend the meetings, but this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. And I think if you just would make us aware of the meetings, I think a lot of us would be glad to participate, because obviously we're getting a lot of discussion here. So I think we're all interested in it, because this is really all about the students.
I think you have to be on there, because in light of the Sunshine Law, if you show up and I show up, it has to be a public.
There's the potential for that.
So
That's why.
they need to
But he
appoint
suggested
somebody,
we have a
appointed person.
board member who is a part of the task force, and that would probably be the way to handle that.
How often do you meet?
We'll be meeting twice a term.
Well, I'll tell you what, at our organizational meeting, why don't we add a person to that task force?
If you're willing, Mr. Johnson, why don't we add you right now?
Yeah, Yvonne said they're in a meeting a week from Friday. Is that right?
And the ones you can make, and then we can do it at an organizational meeting, we can appoint someone.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Great, okay.
One of the other things that the students asked for is to increase the number of textbooks on reserve in the library. And so we've looked at additional funding for that purpose. It used to be that the publishers would give us complimentary copies. Those have kind of disappeared now with the cost of textbooks the way they are. So we are encouraging all of our academic departments to make sure that there is a reserve copy. And one of the ways in which we can increase that is to use the e-book instead, because an e-book is about half the cost of a hard copy. And so we can double what we have accessible in the library for our students by using the e-book as opposed to a hard copy.
That would cost the college more money, right? To increase the...
Yes, I mean, if we put more, and that's, in fact, I put a little preview of one of the things that we propose to fund from that line that we have in the auxiliary would be library book purchases.
That's the reason I asked the question. I think in your budget that you're going to present to us in the near future, why don't you include that additional cost of e-books or whatever to put more in the library of the textbooks, more, I don't want to say textbooks because they are textbooks, they're e-books, but whatever the student would have access to that information.
We will do that. That's one of the, I think it's a great idea. One of the things we've been doing for the last 6 months is starting to spend some of that auxiliary fund that had really built up for student services and a number of other things, and this is consistent with that. And so when we do the budget, we'll have that line for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, to look at.
The last issue is one that we've talked about over and over, and it always comes up, and that is to simply continue to pursue less costly electronic books, the e-readers and so on. And we intend to do that. We are still closely following, as I said earlier, the Daytona State model, and as Mr. Gibbons said, right now there are 100 things happening all over the country in this arena, and we need to pursue all of them very aggressively, and we'll do so via the task force and so on. And I think you'll see a lot of things changing over the next year or so. And that pretty much wraps it up.
Right, and I want to add that while we are looking at electronic readers, not everyone would like to have electronic readers. Some would like hard copies as well, and so we will try to keep a good balance as much as possible so that we can serve all different types of access to textbooks. And so the bottom line is we've come up with some strategies and some things that we would like to do for the rest of this academic year and move on into the next year. One, engaging faculty, staff, and students with the textbook availability task force, highlighting alternatives, encouraging faculty as they look at new editions of their textbooks. Is it substantially different, worth going on to the new edition, etc. Encouraging more of the Common Course textbook idea, where different subjects or disciplines will have the same textbook. That makes it easier for students to resell or gain access to textbooks. And then to work with the bookstore and getting them to provide clear and concise communication to us and to the students, so we'll know what's going on, and we'll continue to research options that will help students with some kind of electronic textbook options.
Sonia, a question, you brought up another interesting point. Can we mandate that textbooks can't be changed by faculty, say, every 3 years?
I think we're in discussion on faculty having options, and they're making the best decisions according to the discipline, any new changes in that area and things of that nature.
Right, and we do have, excuse me, policy in place that we want to keep a textbook at least for a 3-year period. One of the things that has come against us, though, is the publishers have not been cooperative in that respect. So we're looking at informed negotiation with the publishers in that regard.
Well, this, I feel pretty certain, would help us if we didn't have to change textbooks every year. We teach it probably the same classes on every campus, that those instructional staff get together and adopt a textbook that's standardized, that they all agree, and agree to keep it for 3 years. And I don't know whether that, if we gave you a board policy on that, would that help?
I think we already have that in place in regards to keeping it for a 3-year period, if at all possible. Now, in some areas like technology, things are changing a bit more rapidly.
There are exceptions, but I just think that in most cases, it'd be far better if, because even in technology, it doesn't change that quickly. But where it does, I think there should be some kind of an override. But I think we need to just control that aspect of it too, so an instructor is just not saying, oh, I like this new textbook, I want to use it. And not everybody on every class may want to do that. Well, that just adds another book that has to be published. And I have this problem at home all the time, and I'll get killed for saying this, but I just don't believe it's in the student's best interest just to be changing textbooks.
We agree, and we're working with faculty, and the deans are working with faculty college-wide to work towards an agreed-upon college-wide textbook for a particular course.
What I'm just saying, if we made a board rule that said they had to, would that give you any more status in negotiations?
Dr. Cooper, if I may help? I think that giving the board rule at some point may help. Today, I'm not sure that would help. Because my understanding of this is that if we give the rule for 3 years, that's great. But the textbook company could still print a new version tomorrow, and we can't get the same version next year that we got today. So the negotiations, I think, we have to start figuring out what other people are doing to get around that issue.
Publisher-driven.
Yeah, it's publisher-driven. It's not,
There's no question about it.
And I think that my kind of final shot at it would be, you can see all the things we're doing, and and these are short-term. Long-term, we need to do everything you folks are saying, and we're all saying, and this contract is out there, and the next contract is going to look so different than this contract, because, first of all, the company itself has moved to pushing rentals. They already know the next contract, and this is not St. Pete College, this is nationally. The contracts are going to look so differently in 2 years. The Daytona thing, if it catches on, there won't be textbooks in 3 years from now. I mean, it's going to be a very different situation. And remember, most of what we teach at this college now is workforce courses. It's not English and psychology. We're talking about Cisco, and we're talking about tech management, and they are changing quickly. So this online is really where we need to be heading. And so the next contract, when it comes, a year, when is it, 2011?
Yes.
So it's close. I mean, that needs to be a tough negotiation, and it should look very different from what we have now, and it may be a different company.
Well, Tom, just one of the things that does bother me is if the legislature says 8% increase on tuition, and we don't have any choice, maybe we have a choice somehow in immediate changes somehow relief to the student in textbook costs.
I agree with you. And the rental, how many people knew about the rental? A third of the students?
It was less than 25%, I'd say.
So that's not a small thing when we say we're going to do a campaign.
Right.
That's a big target we have there.
Right.
I just have one or two questions. What percentage of the textbooks out there right now are able to be rented? What percentage of the total books, roughly? Do you have any idea?
We were, I think, originally at about 10% with our pilot. I think we're moving to a much larger number, and I'll have to check that. I apologize, I don't know the percentage. But originally, I had said to them, the rental program is going to bring students back. And after the pilot, they saw that, and now they want to go nationwide with it. So there's a real push to wherever they can do a rental on a textbook. And so long as it's more than a one-section textbook, there's option for rental. If it's a small number of students using that textbook because it's a specific, say, elective class, then it's probably less likely to be part of a rental program. It's the large number one. So I'll have to check that for you as to where we are on rentals.
And is it Follets right now that is controlling the number of textbooks that we are able to rent?
They're willing to do rental with wherever, we have a large enough number of students using that particular textbook. So they want as much as possible. So I don't see any resistance in that regard.
Do you have any idea what percentage of our students right now are renting textbooks?
Well, of course, in the fall term, it was less than 10%. It was a very small number because it was a pilot. I don't have the exact percent. I do know that they saw a lot more activity this in the fall term because they expanded the number of books. I imagine in the summer and fall it's going to go up because probably 70-80% of our books are going to be in the rental program.
We'll bring that information back.
Who is going to be negotiating the contract?
Well, we'll have a team. We'll have legal, we'll have me, Annie.
And what will be your main goals, briefly, like the top 2 or 3 goals of what you're going to try to achieve in this next contract?
Well, of course, some of that will need to be determined, such as commission structures and those kinds of things. But I think primarily is what are Follett's directions on the electronic text. I mean, that's where we want to go ultimately, and that's where the publishers are going, and that's where the bookstores are going. So I think that may be the primary topic in our negotiations is moving to more of an electronic format. But I anticipate by June of 2011, we'll have a lot more knowledge of where that's going and what's available at that time.
Is it June of 2011 is when
Yes.
our current contract
Yes.
ends?
Right.
And obviously, those discussions will be starting well before that. with
Absolutely.
them, Okay. Any other questions?
Can I ask just one more? I'm sorry, but you didn't get to Dick's question about the voucher idea. You had talked at an earlier meeting, at least 2 or 3 board members had talked about the profit that's in there that comes to the college, and is there something we could do? And one option that's out there that Doug had suggested was we look at the possibility of not changing the contract, but taking a portion of our share and putting in a pot of funds that would be available as a discount to students on the textbooks. And if that was something that was of interest, that's something we could work up as a program. So let's say we were bringing in $100 that was available for student assistance, for some of the programs that I'm doing with Tanja now in the last few months. What if we took a percentage of that and set it aside and put together a voucher system? So we wouldn't be changing the contract, but if a student did indeed rent, they'd get a discount. It would be a way to do something in a quicker way, as you're suggesting.
Well, and I think that probably makes a little bit of sense because it's an immediate problem, and you're going to have in the fall, more than likely the 8%, you're going to have more need. I guess if you could put a certain amount of that money into, I guess maybe even through the foundation or whoever grants these scholarships, we could have an application go out for a bookstore scholarship and run it through the same organization we do now for tuition. And put a pot of money in that. And I think if we built that into our budget now for next year, because if you're going to throw an 8% increase on the students, I just think we need to do something to alleviate that, and that's one thing we have control over.
Mr. Chair. I agree with you, Mr. Johnston. I also think that we should allow these folks to come back to us with all the ideas before we start trying to. I don't think the best ideas are up here, not because we're not the smartest people.
No question.
I think the best ideas are out in the college somewhere. I'd like to see them come back with a lot of things. Maybe there's a bonus that could be given to an instructor who comes up with the program to have complete e-books for their course how we do that. But let them come back with things that they think are going to help us move through this process. I'd really like to see what they are able to bring back, because I think there's probably more innovative things that are happening across the country and in the classrooms than we know.
Mr. Burton.
Good points. One area which I really appreciate your assistance on is it was very telling during the student conversations on the campuses about the students who are especially the first-time Pell recipients only being able to buy their books for the bookstore, and we run, our intentions are very noble there, the way we give them credit basically until their Pell money comes in, but here you have the poorest students who aren't given the option to go buy books from alternative sources because their Pell money's not here yet, and because you have to put out cash for those. And I saw where you have that charge card or whatever, grant card program or something. But this is also kind of follow up with what Mr. Johnson was saying. Maybe this is something even the foundation would be able to make loans to these students to buy them from the alternative sources, and then when the Pell money comes in, the foundation gets paid back. I'm sure there'll be cases where they drop out, we lose on Pell, and maybe the foundation's willing to absorb that. But I think that's just an idea. I know you're going to examine every idea, but I hope, like Devron's saying, you really look broadly and just, there's other ways to make this happen. But that was one in particular because it's just so counterproductive to take your poorest students and to make them jump through more hurdles than should be allowed to help them get to school. So anyway, I really appreciate you all looking at it. I know you're looking into that, and that's really good.
Mr. Johnson.
One last comment, and I think what Mr. Gibbons had just said, is it possible to get this crew back in a couple of months and we can talk more about this? I know we've got a workshop scheduled. We could do a special workshop at 8 o'clock maybe sometime in June or July, and just to give us more update on where we're going, because the fall semester will be here pretty quickly, and whatever we want to implement, we probably need to make decisions on how we do it.
And we'll have some better data too, because at the end of the fall we'll have a better sense of where the rental program, the success, and so on. I would say. Yeah.
Thank you all very much for putting this together. Very much appreciated. Okay, we have some international programs. Strategic plan, please. Karen White and Ann Cooper.
Ann, you get overtime pay today?
By the way, y'all do a good job. Thank you. Outstanding.
We gave her a week in Seattle.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We wanted to come back and share with you our consultants report, which helped, I think, focus our international programs on our central mission of education. And so I'm going to turn it over to Karen to share a little bit of information with you, and then we'll answer any questions. You've been provided with a summary of the report, and so we'd like to just be available to you this morning to answer any questions that you might have. Karen?
Thank you, Ann. Good morning.
Good morning.
The last time I spoke with you as a board about international programs was way back in 2008 when I was dean for just a few months. Some things have happened since then. I'm back re-engaged just as in the last few weeks with international programs again. I'm happy about that. I'm enjoying getting reacquainted with international programs and just starting to learn about international student services. As you know, those two departments were combined into single leadership since my time with the program, and Violetta Sweet directs both of those areas. I'm grateful to Violetta for being here today. I still have lots to learn. I might need to turn to her for some of your questions depending on what they are. The strategic plan that's in your packet results from a convergence of several circumstances. One of them is our stated college strategic direction that does talk about focus on global concerns. Another is the well-known rich history and tradition that the college has in the international arena. And then we have the merger of the two programs that I just talked about. And last but very much not least are the conclusions and recommendations that came to us in the consultant's report from our esteemed then consultant, Tom Furlong. And the lion's share of the strategic plan does come from that. So we're here to answer any questions that you may have, but there's one thing I want to make sure you know that we are keeping front and center as we go forward with the Center for International Programs. And that is that we understand, we appreciate, we agree with what the focus of international programs should be, and that is for college mission-related activity. We'll keep that in front of us. We have good guidance, of course, from Dr. Cooper and from Dr. Furlong in that regard. I'm sure we will from Dr. Law as well. And then we have the shape of the strategic plan that helps keep us focused on mission-related activity, not the least of which is narrowing the list of countries with whom we'll be doing business most of the time. Not all of the time, but most of the time. We also have an appreciation for state and even locally driven economic development goals and how St. Pete College can come alongside and do things for economic development that involve our students and that make sense for our college mission activity. So that's our backdrop, mission-related activity, and we're working hard. We have a still yet to be completed to-do list issuing from the strategic plan, not the least of which is what the literature calls internationalizing the campus. As wonderful as study abroad is, obviously, most of our students can't afford to do that, no matter how much we do to help them study abroad. So we have a big push for internationalizing the campus, having two-way video and other interactive activity in our face-to-face classes and our online classes for students who can't actually get on an airplane and study abroad. I do have one fun fact I want to share with you before we open it for questions. You might recall in 2008, that was a soft relaunch of study abroad. That year, we had 38 participants in 4 programs. For 2010, obviously I haven't been around, so this doesn't have anything to do with me, okay, we have 84 projected participants in 5 programs. So obviously moving in the right direction as far as productivity is concerned too, in the number of programs and the number of participants in study abroad. Yes, Mr. Burke.
Let me just finish that out, because that was really short. I think they're trying to respect time, but let me just say really directly, and I'm probably restating what Karen said, but we had way too many countries. Mm-hmm. We were doing a lot of missionary work, not mission central work. We had a structure that didn't fit very well. It spread across, sure. And we tried to pull it together into a single structure under Karen and Violetta. We tried to think of what that office does is related to training and related to exchanges with students and faculty primarily. If something's on the missionary category, if there's an earthquake in Haiti, we don't not respond as a college. We ask Tanja to get the students involved and work with the governor's office to respond. But that's not part of this office. This office is to make sure that a student who comes to this college, primarily a community college, now with a bachelor mission, just like with honors, they also have the access to international. So I think it's a strong core thing we want to do international. And I think on the issue of countries, we were a little overweighted on Eastern Europe. We need to have some activity in Eastern Europe because of our history, but we weren't doing enough in Spanish-speaking countries. And those we were in were largely not areas we'd necessarily want to send students on a regular basis like Haiti or Guatemala, but we need to do the Costa Ricas and the Spains and all on the Spanish side. And then we were missing totally Canada. No visas, it's close. Half the Canadians come here in the winter and have homes here, and you can get there very inexpensively, and there's some great French-speaking universities that offer to partner with us. So I really think that the team here has done a great job. We had no good facilities, Dr. Cutler, before he left, and the team has put together an amazing facility at the Gibbs campus. We've approved the facility at the Clearwater campus. So I think it's a tighter mission. If 3 people walk on campus from Azerbaijan, we don't necessarily sign an agreement. We're very friendly, but our agreement may be with Russia. If Canada, all 10 provinces want to do something with us, we don't do 10 agreements. We focus on 1 or 2 universities where we can do French intensive or we can do English. And then that's it. That's all you really have to do. And that we get involved with a consortium like CCIS in those other countries. Had dinner last night with Bill Law, and that's kind of what they do at Tallahassee, and we had a good discussion about international. And so I think we've tried to respond to what some of the concerns you all brought up, and Karen and Ann have done the lead on that, so that's my 2 cents on it.
Mr. Berg.
Okay. This is an area of great interest to me because for the past 2 years I've served on the AACC Global Commission on Global Education, and I chaired it this past year. And so I got to hear from colleges all over the nation who are members of the commission. And first of all, how many international students do we have, full-time students here at our college?
F1 students, 311 at the moment.
One of the things which we talked about a lot on the commission was the challenges that community colleges face, and every time I heard these challenges, I'm thinking, well, gosh, St. Pete is in a tremendous position here. First of all, students who come from international to the United States want to make sure they achieve a 4-year degree. They're not coming here for 2-year degrees, they're coming here for 4-year degrees. So they emphasized how strong the articulation agreements and to show that your students are successful after leaving us. Well, they don't have to leave us. They can get their 4-year degree here, but if they offer it in a field that we don't have, you have to prove in your marketing that indeed that your 2-year degree is worth something to get that 4-year degree. They emphasize that tremendously, and they also emphasize the need for your college to be involved in helping that student getting the visa. Apparently things have eased up this past year or two, but they were saying the more you support a student through that process and they have to get the visa in their home country at the American consulate there, they by helping them in that process, they will come to your school. And schools that don't offer that type of assistance often lose the student to the ones that are offering that type of assistance. But what was really compelling in Dick and Devron, we talked about money. Let me tell you, the talk at the Global Education Commission was, hard as it sounds, this is money for the school. And we had a report from a college president who's in the state of Washington, Rich, and I forget his last name, but he's a CPA, Dick. And everything he talked about global education was in the terms of finances. And he has a most successful program, and he showed this financial statement for global education, and they make over $5 million a year that goes into their general fund because of their global education program. So he talked about it not only as a good thing to do for your college, he talked about in hard numbers, this is a profit center for the college because of the tuition that are charged to the out-of-country students.
Right, I believe that was Green River Community College. Excuse me, and I had the advantage of visiting them on Monday, and I have some very good ideas that we can incorporate. They actually
on-campus housing, across the street housing.
But they have they actually have a very large host family program as well, and they have actually expanded to bring in high school students who then do like we do with our dual enrollment, international high school students who get complete their high school degree and then their 2-year, and then go on for their 4-year.
What's the name of the college?
Green River Community College.
Let me tell you, they have a video which just shows, it's very compelling, and they show where their students leave and they go to Texas, Illinois,
Wisconsin,
University of Michigan, Berkeley, yes, and it's just a superb video. We probably should see that at one of the future meetings. It's just, but I mean, the object here is they make $5 million a year off this program.
Right. They kind of, they run.
I'm glad you visited them.
Right. They run like a private college within a public college. So the whole international program is separate. But they do raise the money to support themselves and their staff of 30. But then they give back to the college something like $1.5 million for the college then to have so they are revenue generating, definitely.
But this is an area with international, and you have to, what I found on the Global Commission, generally, most international students, there's a connection somewhat. And it's not, they'll say they have this many countries represented, but then when you get right down to it, probably 60% of their students come from a couple countries.
Yeah, they're primarily Asian, China, Vietnam, Korea, Japan are the primary areas that they're focused on.
You think about what we have to offer here, weather-wise, Tampa Bay area has a lot going for it, plus we have the 4-year degrees which we can offer. I mean, we have some unique marketing things that we could put that other community colleges don't.
Exactly, and that's what we're trying to initiate with our new Language Institute, which is our English as a Second Language program that will be offered to a number of different populations simultaneously. We can offer that to international students online so they can get their English before they come here, which is better for them cost-wise. We can also offer it to F1 students who are here currently, and what we've done is we're getting the credit side and the non-credit side of the house to work together. So if a student's English is at the very introductory levels, they can come over to corporate training, whereas before we would have to send them to places like Eckerd to be able to bring them up to a level where they can test into English as for academic purposes and then move on with their college career. And then also offer that, which is one of the things that Green River does, just as a language institute, which also then offers some cultural aspects associated with it, because you have some individuals that just want to come over to learn English, or offer it to corporations in the area that may have non-English speaking individuals coming over to Florida for business purposes, and to be able to provide them and their families with English as a second language program as well.
One more question. Do we have a goal, like as part of our plan, as to how many international students we're trying to have enroll here? I mean, do we want 1,000 students here? Do we want...
We haven't said that yet. We wanted to reorganize and get the necessary pieces in place, and then I believe that's our next step, is to look at what's our goal, because I know Green River, they have a certain number of individuals who are responsible for marketing, and they set a specific goal of the number of students, and they have about 10% of their overall student population that are international.
The consultant had a goal. Was 800.
800?
Yeah.
And I would hope that we would see a financial statement that goes along with that goal of 800 as to what it would mean financially.
Exactly. And they all pay out of, they all pay full cost.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do we market our program?
Go there.
Currently, we market primarily online. We also advertise through a number of it's the American Association of Community Colleges, references, and on their website of colleges that are looking for international students and what kinds of programs we have.
It's a quality publication too that
Yes.
AACC puts together.
Yes. And then there's a second one that we also advertise in, and I'm afraid that jet lag is set in, and I don't remember the name of it.
And just so you know, Hong Kong